All right, now we've got a little something special. I know this has been a long show, and I apologize for that. But at the same time, the segment that we have coming up is important to me. It's called S-Scale Today. I'm doing one of these on each one of the scales. I've done one in the past on N-Scale that turned out to be, I think, very successful and popular. And I think this one will be too. When I was selecting a scale, I selected O-Scale because I was around a lot of people that were in O-Scale. And that's what they talked about. And I was a Lionel collector, and it was just a natural for me to migrate to O-Scale. I never met an S-Scaler. I met a couple of people who were an American Flyer when I was a kid. But after that, I really just, I don't know, I just never ran across S-Scale modelers. So it never occurred to me to look into S-Scale as a scale for myself. And so that's why this is kind of important to me. Second reason is, for the last 5 years, I've been writing the New Track series for Amy and Dan's publication, S-Scale Resource Magazine. And my articles are the same for S-Scale modelers as they are for O-Scale modelers. Both of them need mentors. The skills are basically the same that you need. The techniques are basically the same that you use. The models are a little bit smaller in S-Scale than they are O-Scale. Prices are different. But other than that, the mentoring that's needed, the development of skills and techniques that are required basically are the same. So therefore, it's kind of easy for me to take modelers in any scale and write about them in my articles, and I do. Because the skills and techniques for modelers are transferable, in my opinion. And I think that's been proven. It was proven in my case because my mentor was an HO scale modeler. So what I've done tonight is I put together a panel, 4 people. And let me introduce them to you. Jamie Bothwell, Mike Warman, Tony Dixon, and Michael Ostertag. And what I'd like to start with here is ask each one of them to tell us a little bit about themselves and their involvement with the S-Scale hobby. And Jamie, I'd like to start with you, sir.
Okay, well, I got into S-Scale. I was an HO modeler for a few years, several years in my youth. I kind of knew S-Scale existed because I would bump into reviews in Model Railroader and various articles in Model Railroader. Model Railroader used to do a series, S-Scale at 40, S-Scale at 50 or whatever. So I kind of knew of its existence. I ran into a couple of S-Scale specific publications at my local hobby shop, and actually, one of the big manufacturers was actually located in my hometown, although I didn't really get involved with them, while I lived there. So eventually, I went to see a fellow's S-Scale layout. It was on a tour, and I thought, wow, man, this is just really cool. I really like the size of these trains. And, I sold all my HO stuff and went into S-Scale. And that was back in about 1987. So I don't know, you do the math. I ran out of fingers and toes. So. Somebody else want to jump in there, or?
Yeah, Mike, how about you? You're muted.
Exactly. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
I started S-Scale about 15 years ago. I ran into an individual who had a huge layout in his basement, and he lived like 8 houses up the street from me. Didn't know he did this stuff. So he was down there, and he really pushed S-Scale on everybody that walked in the door. He was the head of the NOS group. That's Northern Ohio S-Scalers. Very popular guy. And he was with the Cleveland group for a while, and then formed just for S scale, no flyer allowed. And his crowd built this 3-level layout that was just awesome. And it wasn't just track. They also had buildings and industry zone and all kinds of really interesting things that you don't see normally. I haven't seen normally. Usually you just get those plywood prairies. But he got me interested and that was a Thursday night. And I tell my friends I was over at his house every Thursday night after that. Because he was just that interesting. And the guys that with him, the guys who knew the history of the B&O and AC&Y and all these other things, it was a learning session.
Well, Tony, how about yourself? Tony Dixon, how about you?
Well, I want to clarify, I'm a 64 scale modeler, not specifically S scale. Prior to S scale, I was an HO scale modeler for the better part of 20 years and took about a 5 to 7 year hiatus from modeling altogether before starting in on 1/64 scale stuff. And over the past few years, I've started acquiring more S scale and been involved with some very good groups of guys that are high into S scale stuff, and hopefully just try to expand the hobby and the knowledge across different aspects of modeling in 1/64 scale.
Well, that sounds like an interesting path you've traveled. Well, Michael was supposed to be with us this evening, but I don't see him here. I know that he had a conflict at some point tonight, so maybe he had to leave the show early. I'm sorry that he couldn't join us. So let me just continue this with the three of you all. And I guess my first question is, what's the major advantage for a modeler to select S scale, and what's the major drawback for the modeler suggesting going with S scale for his choice of scales? Jamie?
Well, I would say, for my opinion, the real thing that any scale offers is size. What is it that you want to do with model railroading, and what size is the best fit for that? And S scale we like to think of as the perfect size, and so it's got a little bit of that space savings of HO, but a little bit of that heft of O scale. So we like to think of it as that perfect sort of middle ground. Probably the biggest disadvantage is that, we being the smallest of the major scales, we have the least amount of stuff available, and it's also the sort of hardest to find. You're not really going to walk into very many hobby shops and bump into a lot of S scale. You really kind of have to look for it. So.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Mike, Tony, how about you guys?
Well, it seemed like you end up ordering online more than anything else because, like you said, hobby shops don't carry S scale. Even if they carry flyer, they don't carry S scale. And we're having more and more companies kind of like drop out. We've had some recent deaths even, but American Models, for instance, Tony Bashista has passed, but they are keeping on the best they can for American Models. As helper, Don Thompson kind of stopped and kind of sold it off, and MTH didn't pick up on it too well. And so it's harder to find, the things that we're used to having. And I hear this month that Dan Navarre, who does fabulous brass S scale stuff with his Korean contact, he is going to be closing his doors at the end of the year. So, but he has tons of brass accessories to go with the models he still has in his shop. So,
Tony, how about you?
Well, major disadvantage, at least as far as my aspect and the group of guys that I deal with, is the lack of modern equipment in S scale. If you want it, you got to build it. If you're lucky, you can find the few pieces that are out there. S scale kind of got stagnant shortly after the transition period between steam and diesel and into the early 60s. And there was a large section in there where there's the equipment and the stuff that you'd see modern days just isn't available. A lot of locomotives and stuff in there you don't have because no major manufacturer picked it up. Dealing with 1/64 scale modeling in general, the fact that the groups seem to butt heads, the diehard modeler groups look at S scale trains as playing with toy trains, and a lot of the S scale modelers look at the diecast modeling groups of individuals and sectors as just collecting toy cars, when all in all it's the same overall hobby. We use the same techniques and stuff, and if major manufacturers would pay attention to actually bridging the gaps with everything in the scale, I believe that a lot of those manufacturers would actually start listening to the hobby, because overall the scale itself, the 1/64 scale modeling, has HO scale beat to dust for the amount of people that are actually modeling and collecting in 1/64 scale versus just the railroad aspect. And that's where the manufacturers seem to focus, is just on the railroad aspect of 1/64 scale modeling. One thing that I did see that was recently announced was that Scale Trains is starting to re-release some of the S Helper service equipment and stuff, and slowly going to be re-releasing that. And I've heard rumors, now these are just rumors, but they're also going to be starting to slowly design and manufacture some of the bridge gap equipment and locomotives that we've been missing in the scale. And I hope that's true. I really do.
Well, we do have a little bit of that problem in that, like the cart before the horse, or however you want to term that. It's like, if you build it, they'll come. Like, we don't have modern models, so nobody buys a modern model, so nobody builds a modern model, so nobody we need somebody to stick their neck out and make them. But most of our manufacturers are not necessarily willing to do that, and I understand that. I mean, it's not, I'm not telling them how to spend their money. They know where their market is. But Tony did touch on the one place S scale really has a vast advantages. We have an amazing assortment of vehicles. We have a really good, there's a lot of 1/64 scale vehicles. Johnny Lightning, and some of those are a little questionable, but M2, I think it is I forget the names. I see a
M2 Machines, Green Light, Auto World is all true 1/64 scale.
Yeah, if I see a car that I like, then I buy it. So, I don't really care what manufacturer it is. So, but anyway, as some of you know, I'm into passenger trains, so I'm firmly implanted into the transition era. And occasionally at the recent S scale convention, I had to fight the urge to backdate that 50 or 60 years. But anyway, if I find any cars from, say, the early 1950s, I just buy a couple examples of them. So,
yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I have heard I have heard the comments that Tony is making from a lot of different modelers who really feel if there was a way, an organization, some kind of a structure where all of the various different hobbies that are involved in 1/64 scale, whether it's model railroading, die-cast, machinery, whatever the hobby is, if there was a way for that group to get together and commit to what they really wanted to see on the market, then I do think that they would have a tremendous market advantage for manufacturers. I just don't see a way for that to happen. How about you guys?
Well, in S-Scale, we do have the NASG, which is the National Association of S-Gaugers. And we have a website, nasg.org. It's a very thorough website. The webmaster is a wonderful guy. He works tirelessly for very little compensation. And, you know, there's literally every time he finds any, you know, there's a listing of manufacturers that anybody he can find that will make anything in 1/64th, they get a plug on our website. And then, you know, of course, there's sort of a history of all the products, you know, obviously more railroad related, but well, at least that's where I spend my time when I'm there. So maybe there's cars and vehicles and whatnot. I don't know. But, you know, buildings, whatever, there's sort of a history of all these past manufacturers. So you can see what's been made, you know, over the course of the years. So if you're at all interested in NASG, or sorry, if you're all interested in S-Scale or 1/64th modeling, I highly recommend that you check out the nasg.org. That's the best place you could start right there. So, and as far as you know, the NASG is sort of an umbrella organization for S-Scale trains. Now, again, I know Tony, you're involved with what is it, like a one-day thing this fall up in Minnesota?
I'm involved with a group of guys from Minnesota that are putting that on.
Right. So there's a group from Minnesota. There's an S-Scale club in Minnesota that they're putting on a one-day thing this fall, which is all just 1/64th modeling. It's not specifically railroads or specifically farm toys, because there's a huge, you know, as we heard, was it a couple weeks ago? There's a huge group of, you know, farm modelers in 1/64th also. So,
you know, just a thought process for you guys. It seems to me that modeling scales tend to match to the prototype that is most common and sought in the scale. So if you think about it, I mean, the problem with S-Scale when you get to the modern era is that things start getting bigger. And the current era tends to be less detailed. So it's a lot easier to migrate to HO. If you want to model modern, the diesels, it's easy to put decoders in them. So that tends to be more modern modeling, where S tends to be more in the transition, where A, things were smaller, B, they were more detailed, especially when you go into steam. What you have now is the larger scale helps you in terms of being able to install electronics, etc. And then if you look at O-scale, and a lot of the recent growth in O-scale has been in the ON30 space. And that again represents the area where you've got a smaller prototype, which therefore is easier to model in a larger scale. And conversely, if you go to the far end, if you look at N, a lot of N modeling is in fact, you know, the most modern modeling, where again, there's the least detail and the largest size to be modeled. So therefore you align with a smaller scale. But it's kind of an interesting thought process as a manufacturer of whether or not somebody who wanted to model the modern era would choose S over HO. When you look at kind of the priorities of modeling with the scale you need, the siding length, etc. So it's an interesting thought as to why you might not see a lot of modern stuff in S-scale, because there may not really be a lot of adoption. It may be more driven by that ratio of scale to the prototype. Anyway, enough said.
I also believe too that, you know, a number of S-scalers are of the age that sort of the transition era was, you know, when they had American Flyer trains as a kid, or they had steam locomotives, and, you know, like that's what they want to model. And realistically, even in HO today, a lot of people want to model the transition era because they kind of get that best of both worlds, steam, diesel, you can kind of have everything. And, you know, so S-scale is sort of, I don't know if you want to say pick the sweet spot, but, you know, it's kind of like, we got a lot of people in this bracket, so we're going with this. And, you know, I don't know.
I think the point I was making is that if you're modeling the transition era, S-scale is a good compromise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between the detail of O and the, call it for lack of a volume scale of HO. But when you get into the modern era, that compromise begins to really go away as the equipment gets larger, and therefore in S it gets even larger, and all of a sudden you say go to HO. And I think the level of detail, I mean, if you compare a steam engine to a modern diesel in terms of the detail level you can actually see and manage it's a lot easier to shrink it into HO with a diesel than it was with a steam. Anyway,
only
just the thought process. It's kind of interesting because we're seeing, for example, a lot of the modelers, the modeling lifestyle are now in O, who are doing these amazing models like Lou Sassy in ON30. So it's interesting.
One of the things too that I keep hearing about is that S scale is the model builder scale. Now, I'm assuming part of that is lack of kits, but is S scale really the model builder scale? Do you believe that?
out of
Well,
necessity.
What I would tell you is that in S scale, you know, you really pretty much have to be. It's not like you have to build everything. You know, they used to say you had to, you know, in S you had to build everything. I mean, you can build a very nice model railroad without really building anything. You know, again, based on the product that's on the market. But if, you know, like we don't really have any built up buildings. So, I mean, if you're going to have structures on your model railroad, you're probably going to have to build them. So, yeah, you're pretty much going to have to build something. You know, you can't just go out and buy, like I know in HO nowadays, they have all these built up structures you can go buy, and, you know, but in S scale, you're going to have to build something. I mean, there's no two ways about it. So,
You think there's more scratch building in S scale than the other scales?
I don't know. I mean, again, if you wanted to talk on a percentage basis, because you know, obviously HO, there's a lot of scratch builders in HO, and because they have, you know, they dwarf us in numbers, I'm sure they dwarf us in sheer numbers of scratch builders. But you know, again, as a percentage wise, I don't know. Again, you know, one of the other things S scale does pretty well with is kits. I mean, building kits, you know, structure kits. We have a lot of structure kits. You know, I mean, you saw the fellow from Motrac tonight. He's, you know, he says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to make it in all 4 scales." You know, I mean, you know, probably sell 10 times as many HO ones as he does S. But you know, we can buy it in S. So there is, you know, and I mean, I personally, like, anytime somebody makes a product that I wanted, I would be like, okay, great. Then I don't have to scratch build that one, but there's still, you know, 100 other things I could, you know, if I really want to get my scratch building, you know, Jones, I can, there's something else I can build. There's always something else you can build. So.
Well, here's the argument that I have toward that as a 1/64 scale modeler in general, and bridging the gap with all the other aspects of the hobby. If you're in and around the turn of the century, there are a ton of kits. If you get post World War II, there's nothing. You can update some buildings with a few detail parts, but you're still basically scratch building anything post World War II. There is a large group of individuals outside of the model railroad world that have been trying to integrate S scale into their displays and their modules, and have given up on it because the modern stuff is not available. And I mean, I could go to the National Farm Toy Show, which has over 1,000 visitors each day for the 3 days that they are open in November, and I could introduce you to a couple hundred farm modelers in 1/64 scale who want railroad, want to integrate railroad, don't, because the modern stuff isn't available. And that's something that's been brought up at that show in small groups. That's something that's part of the group that I'm with from Minnesota. That's why we're trying to get this gap bridged. Is there are a ton of modelers outside of the specific model railroad niche in 1/64 scale that want to integrate model railroading, but again, everything or the bulk of what is available is the transition era, and they're modeling modern. Award winners for 1/64 scale modeling at these shows, at the National Farm Toy Show, the St. Louis Farm Toy Show, the Lafayette Farm Toy Show, a large group of them have voiced that they want to integrate railroad, but they're modeling modern day, not 1950s, early 1960s, and the stuff just isn't available. So they're not integrating the model railroading into their displays.
But Tony, if the association that I think it was Jamie was talking about, the National S-Gauge Association, if wouldn't could they be the voice for the farm modelers and for these other groups that want to join in with the S-scale model railroaders? Or have you all
They
tried
have
to?
the NASG has shown at the National Farm Toy Show. I believe they've shown at the Summer Farm Toy Show. They were represented by the wrong group of individuals with the display that they brought to show. They tried to pander to the farm toy guys by bringing their modules and setting up their track with their farm related modules, and they had children, and I mean 5, 6 years old, calling them out on mistakes on their modules because the modules were designed or built by people who knew nothing about knew nothing about farming. And I mean, when the 5 and 6 year olds are calling them out because they blatantly had something wrong on it, and they're being misrepresented. I mean, the group is there trying to represent, but they're being the group of individuals that went to do the representing were not the group of individuals to be representing the S-scale modeling at the show.
Well, it's certainly not my place to say, but if I was heavily involved with that association, it would seem to me that I'd want to talk to this group, because that to me would be a potential membership category that I may not have had before.
Well, in our defense, somebody told me at the convention that they tried to pitch something to what's the magazine, Farm Toy Modeler or something like that.
Yeah, that's the only real hard copy magazine.
Okay,
and
well,
they are not a 1/64 scale oriented farm toy magazine.
Okay, well, somebody tried to pitch an article to them about what you could do with railroads for your for your 1/64 scale models, and the editor said we're not interested.
They're not interested in anything 1/64 scale.
So
Toy Farmer is a 1/16 scale farm toy collectors magazine.
Okay.
They want nothing. They overall, in whole, they ignore the 1/64 scale part of the farm toy magazine.
Okay.
I know they're the only hard copy magazine, hard paper magazine that does anything with farm toy modeling. They are not representative of the overall small scale 1/64 scale farming world. They are set in their ways, and they are 99.95% 1/16 scale farm toy collecting.
Okay.
That they are the worst person to talk to. I mean, yes, they're the ones that actually sponsor and put on the show in November. They sponsor the trophies for the different modeling categories, but they are not a 1/64 scale modeling magazine.
Okay, well,
the individuals that you need to talk to are Toy Tractor Times, which is an all online forum. They are the one that would get the largest group of 1/64 scale modelers' attention, and they are what will get you the best feedback also.
all right. Well, maybe your organization and my organization need to talk. So
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me too.
if I could,
Another thing that I've run into, both for the show and for articles, I keep hearing that the S-scaler is basically the silent scale. It's hard to find them, and I compared to the other scales, I don't know why that is. Do you?
well, S-scale, it's like, again, like I kind of said about building the modern models, it's like we've been ignored by the mainstream press, if you will, for so long that we've just sort of found our own ways around things. For the longest time, okay, I'll give you an example. Model Railroader one time, I don't remember, but like back in the day when they would run a drawing, they would say, you could build this model by doing this or this or this. In HO, you could do this, and in O scale, you could do this, right?
Yeah.
So they had a drawing of a GP18. And they said, in HO scale, you could kit bash this, and in O scale, you could do that. And they didn't mention S scale at all. When in S scale, you could go out and buy the locomotive as a, relatively simple kit. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was advertised by a manufacturer, an S-scale manufacturer. There was an ad a couple pages away from the drawing. So they could have promoted their own advertisers by saying, you know, why don't you go buy this kit if you want to build an S-scale? And the drawing in the magazine was in S-scale. So, you know, there's a joke that S-scale just, you know, they don't really exist. It's only there for drawings. You know, they just, you know, you see all these drawings in S-scale and, you know, but nobody, you know, they fit on a page well, but like, you know, like the press sort of ignores us. So you know, we've learned workarounds. And so, you know, we hide in our little cave and nobody sees us and, you know, we have a good time and we're happy, but, you know, yeah, we are kind of hidden away. You know, that's been a problem. I mean, you know, we talk about, you know, we do our best and that's what our website, we're trying to promote, you know, so.
Yeah.
Anyway. Mike, you got anything to add on that?
It's just very difficult to go to a show and find S-scale at a show. You will find flyer all over the place, but you go to the show, it's hard to find anything S there. And it's getting kind of disappointing. Again, about the only thing you can do is order your stuff online. And it's
Could I show a really quick video?
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
not going to make
please.
Tony happy, but
Please do, Jay.
all right, if I do this and where did it go now? That's this one right here. Okay, so, oh, I got to do share. Yeah, share. Okay, all right. And if I do that. All right, you guys seeing that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'll just pause right there. That locomotive is almost completely 3D printed. I believe the frame was 3D printed and then like in a wax and then done with a lost wax casting. And then the driver centers are 3D printed and then they have metal tires pressed onto them. So, you know, again, this is the kind of thing that we're doing in S-scale right now to, you know, promote the, you know, like it's, you can build one of these and it's okay. You can build 20 of them and it's okay. You know, it's sort of the overcoming this idea that you want to build, you know, like if you're going to have a plastic, you're going to make a plastic cast locomotive, you know, you're going to want to sell 10,000 of those to get your money back. And, you know, these you can just one off them and it doesn't matter. So that's kind of cool. So that's built by a fellow who lives in Montreal.
I'm sorry. Who built that?
Simone Perrant, he's from Montreal.
Awesome.
So yeah, this was a, you know, footage from the recent S-scale convention. So there you go. And then it happens to be pulling a couple of my cars. That's something that's a mostly laser cut car right there. So again, I can make one of those. I can make 100 of them. I don't really plan to make 100 of them because I'm not really a manufacturer, but, and then that little box car is a BTS kit, Bill's Train Shop kit. It's a Pennsylvania Railroad XA. So again, that's mostly a laser cut kit. So again, the laser, you know, these new technologies are going to help us, and I'll just stop there. But you know, I feel like a lot of these, you know, the 3D printing and the laser cutting are good for us because you don't have to go through the whole expense and trouble of tooling up, you know, to make hundreds and hundreds of models. I guess you're holding up a laser cut, what is that, SW1500 or something? Or sorry, not laser cut, but 3D printed.
3D printed 1500, yes.
Yeah.
Ken Zieska had some of these kits at the.
Yeah, I see. He had one. I saw he had one at Minnesota. I was looking what he was doing with it. So
Yeah, that is 95%, 99% 3D printed.
yeah. Does it run on? Is it run on an S Helper chassis? Is that?
No, it uses Stanton drives.
Oh, Stanton's okay.
It's got a full 3D printed chassis.
Oh, okay.
This one's a dummy. Like the only things not 3D printed on here are the handrails, the stanchions, and the axle shafts themselves, and the grabs and the other detail parts, most of which are from BTS.
Right, and see, I look at that as being a, you know, that's the way you're going to get your more modern diesels. You know, we you know, somebody who's got the skills can draw that up, and then You can 3D print them and maybe make a urethane shell for it. And then, we don't have to go through like thousands of dollars of tooling. So,
Well,
I'm
that's the
hoping
whole reason those come around, is because somebody needed a set of newer switch locomotives for
So, I mean,
their
but
display for
that's,
National Farm Militia.
that's what happens with a lot of S scale stuff. It's like necessity. I need this, so you make it, and then you make it available, and other people can have one too. So, I mean,
Yes.
there's a couple of guys on Shapeways that are doing that. They've got some S scale locomotives. They just wanted them for themselves, and they figured, well, if I'm making it, it's I make one, then I can make as many as anybody wants. So
Let me ask you a question, because somebody just brought it up about American Flyer models. Well, American Flyer modelers are S-scale modelers in a lot of ways, depending on how they do their layouts. If they use if they use the same kits for the structures, the same kind of scenery material, the same things that a scale modeler would use, except for the track and wheels, what's the difference whether they're American Flyer or S-scale modelers? Aren't they in the same market?
They have the big knuckle couplers that look ugly.
Yeah.
there's a lot of there are occasionally considerable compromises to be able to accommodate flyer sized flanges and the knuckle couplers. So, a lot of scale modelers look at that and they don't, I don't want to deal with that because it's this or that. And, if you're a real scale modeler, you're going to make compromises, the pilot's going to be open or something like that. So
Yeah.
there is that possibility, but yeah, there are a lot of, and then, S scale, I mean, O scale, I'm sure is somewhat the same, but you've got guys that they want to buy an American Flyer train, take it out of the box, put it on their layout and watch it go around in circles. Okay. Then you've got
Yep.
this group that we call high railers, and they are, they use American Flyer type track, and maybe they use couplers, but maybe they've gone to Katy couplers, but they still have the deeper flanges and the larger wheels, and they build beautiful. Some of them build beautiful scale models. I mean, there's a guy, Brooks Stover, if you've heard of him, he's been in Model Railroad a few times. I mean, he's got a gorgeous layout, but it's high rail. It's got the taller flanges and all that, although he uses the Katy couplers. So, some of those guys really build. So yeah, there's a definite crossover there, sure. But some of them, there are the flyer guys who don't want to do anything but flyer. And I mean, that's their hobby. They can do whatever they want. But, I'm not trying to badmouth them. I'm just saying it's just not what a lot of the scale guys want to do. So I don't know. I'm looking at the chat here, Tony. Did you see that question about nominate 4 items that you would?
I saw that. I can think of 2 right off top of my head that would be good, that are a big generational, that they start bridging the gap between what the modern stuff that's available through Flying L and the stuff like American Models and stuff has available. And that would be coming out with the Dash 2 chassis and the different shells that would fit on a Dash 2 chassis for a Jeep. Because if a manufacturer came out with a Dash 2 chassis, they could have a 38-2, they could have a 40-2, they could have a large, they could start doing a large selection of locomotives that are still being used by short lines, by even Class 1 railroads, and so on, that can still be considered modern, but be bridging that gap. Another one is some good post 1970, post 75 grain cars that would still be on the tracks. I know there's a couple guys working on them and working on designing kits and whatever to get some of those out there. But I know those are 2 items that a lot of the guys that are wanting to get into the model railroading, a lot of younger guys, and I mean preteens, teens, 20s, that are outside of the model railroading community currently, that's the kind of stuff that they're looking to get.
And do you think a
for
Jeep
starting out.
38? Do you think a Jeep 38 is new enough?
A Dash 2. As
Okay.
long as it's the -2, because that gives you the chassis that you can have a 38-2, a 40-2. You know, 40-2s are still being used by Class 1 railroads currently.
Oh yeah, so are 38, but you know,
And 38s. Down here at Marshalltown, Iowa, at the Union Pacific yards, I bet you there's 10 or 15 of them around the yard there on any given week.
yeah, I mean, I think I can still, I live about a mile from a Norfolk Southern yard, and I think there's a couple of 38s that sort of live in there, so.
Yep, and that, you know, so, and it would be if the manufacturer did that -2 chassis, there's a large assortment of bodies that would go, you know, of the -2 bodies that fit that chassis, that they wouldn't have to modify the chassis to get the production out there. And it would, you know, that will start A, bridging the gap where the stuff is, and B, it'll help bring in some of these individuals and groups from outside who are wanting to do, you know, wanting to add railroad to their displays, that don't want, you know, Jeep 9s and stuff like that you just don't see anymore.
Now, you feel like I mean, these farm displays that I've seen pictures of are pretty much like dioramas. I mean, would people would they just include a siding in their diorama, or would they want a full on, like, you can drive the train around kind of thing? How do you feel about that?
Yes. Both aspects. It depends on the individual. A lot of them want to add a siding or add a chunk of main line going through their farm, and they want the stuff on there that they see. And the farm toy guys are not scared to spend money. And I kid you not about that. And I will, if you give me a half second, I will show you a prime example. Okay? I do stuff for 1/64 scale guys. This tractor right here. A lot of the model railroaders go, okay, it's just a seam filler. This is a $300 1/64 scale tractor.
Whoa.
I get $300 to $350 out of this tractor when it's all set, when I sell it. And I mean, this is, you know, the front end steers, pivots. It's got the functioning 3-point. It is a scale model to 1/64 scale of the tractor. And the farm toy guys pay this. They have no problem paying the money for the stuff if it's available. You know, you tell them, okay, there's a 38-2 available. It's $250. You know, like the American Models Jeep 9. I'm going to use that for an example. You have a company like American Models. They have a 38-2 comes out next week, and the farm toy guys catch wind of it. And a modern, what model number? Like a 4570 grain hopper comes out, and the farm toy guys catch wind of it. It's like, oh, hey, modern stuff, modern paint job. You know, boom, it sells because they catch wind of it. They find out. And now I cannot confirm this. This is from a second hand, but one of the best selling shows for Des Plaines Hobbies is when they set up at the Lafayette Toy Show. And that's a farm toy show, not a model railroad show. And that's because it's getting it out there. Oh, hey, there are scale, you know, 1/64 scale stuff that's being presented, being available for sale. And a lot of the guys, you know, that they're buying that stuff that they can get there, and they're choosing the stuff that is close to what they see currently around.
Well, listen, let me ask you one last question here before we close this up, because it's getting late. Where is the hobby going for S-Scale? Where do you see it in 3-5 years from now?
Well, I don't know if we can get some synergy with these farm guys going up. I mean, you know, sounds like that would be a way to go. So, I mean, we're going to have to talk. So,
yeah, if we can get I feel if we can get the market gap, especially because the farm toy modeling group and the die-cast modeling group in general is younger than most of the S-Scale model railroading group. that I've been involved with and that I've talked with, if we can get the farm toy group exposed to the S scale and get some of the manufacturers interested, involved with, and listening to what the groups, the other 64 scale modeling groups are looking at from a manufacturer's lookout and from the hobby in general, I feel it could very well grow. But if there isn't an effort put forth somewhere from some group to initiate it, I think it's going to be about the same as it's been and fairly stagnant.
Mike, what do you think?
I think that at the rate we are losing our hobby modelers here, it's going to be difficult without getting younger people involved. Somehow we have to get younger people under 40, involved in this.
Well, let me give you my opinion, and it's not worth much. I write for the magazine, but I write from a modeling standpoint, not from, actually an S scale operator. It seems to me that either the NMRA or the National S Scale Association is really needs to take a hard look at these other non-model railroading groups that Tony keeps talking about, and I've heard about from an awful lot of farm modelers, particularly the die-cast people. I've heard it from a few. I don't talk to many of those, although now I'm starting to run into them more and more as I meet different people in that hobby. But from the farm modeler's perspective, what Tony is saying is exactly what I've been told. Number one, it's a younger group of people. Number two, yes, they are interested in model railroading for their dioramas. Three, yes, they are spending money. They have the money to spend and they don't mind spending it. The $350 tractor that Tony showed you, I've heard stories like that from the buyers of those kind of items. I have heard that the farm modeler part of the S scale market is what they feel that they bring to the table for S scalers is 3D printing capability that they believe is far further along than it is in model railroading for S scale. What they believe the S scale model railroader brings to the table is scenery construction. And they feel that they have an awful lot to learn from model railroaders in scenery. They have an awful lot to give to model railroaders 3D printing. That's basically what I hear. And it seems to me that if one of those associations stepped up and said, okay, let's see if we can put this together. To me, I think that there is a deal to be made there, but I just don't see the impetus to make the deal from any source right now. So I encourage that to happen. And if you all agree, I encourage you as leaders in the S scale market and 1/64th market to try to make something like that happen, because I do think there's a deal to be made there.
Well, I could say from Motrac, the S scaler, my client, has increased about 50% from 2 years ago. I sell a lot of S scale structure kits. Now, when I go to shows like the one in Atlanta, Georgia, there's an S gauge group that's set up, and they will not buy any laser cut kits. They like the old stuff, American Flyer stuff.
Yeah, Plasticville, like I say, it's like, it's straight up flyer and Plasticville buildings. And, it's, again, that's your hobby. You have at it, but it's not what I'm doing. It's not what Mike's doing. So
Hey,
it's not what Tony's
Jeff,
doing.
I have promoted your company with quite a few outside of the model railroad world in the 1/64 scale modeling overall. and I know a few of them have purchased models from you. And I know on your end, it doesn't look any different than the regular model railroaders making the purchases. But, you know, it is that outside group because for the farm toy world, you know, we're finding the building kits and stuff and then updating them as we can to get what we need.
Right.
And, you know, that could be where you're starting to see your increases actually from outside of the model railroading world in the 164 scale model.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, listen, guys, thanks so much for being here tonight. I really do appreciate your time and your comments. And I think you've done a great job in trying to present the S-scale situation. And I really do appreciate you being here tonight. Any of you have any final word?
I would say, you know, S-scale, you come for the trains, you stay for the family. Stay for the people.
Mike? Tony?
Oh, I just hope things keep growing and
There you go.
that it keeps going that way.
Well, thanks again, guys. I really do appreciate it. And everybody else,
That's what I heard about the national in Niagara Falls is like a family reunion.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
I think what Mike is saying is that, you know, again, we just had our convention in Buffalo and it's like a family reunion.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, guys, thanks so much for being here tonight and really telling us about the S-scale market. I really do appreciate it. And I think we learned a lot.